Good morning, YouTube family. It's KT Outdoors here. Today we're going to take a little walk down to the food forest because I messed up. I didn't mess up bad, but I messed up. And I need to show you what I did so that maybe you can learn from my mistake. That's coming up next. Guys, well, good morning. It's a beautiful day, at least here to start with, but I wanted to come down here because, you know, a lot of you may have seen the video that I did on the pandemic garden, which is, you know, you can't see it with the sun, sorry. It's the garden that's over there, literally directly under the sunshine. But you may not be aware that I also have another garden on the other side of the property, which is right over here. And we call this one the food forest, mostly because I'm trying to turn it into a food forest. It's got a little bit of there's some trees and stuff in there, and some fruit trees and different things that we're trying to make it a little bit more foresty. But I made a mistake in here this year that I knew better, but I was freaking out a little bit about this whole pandemic thing and growing as much food as I could, and I planted something in there that I maybe shouldn't have, and now it's eating my food forest. Let me show you. But let's walk in here and I'll show you my problem. So already you may be noticing the beginning of the problem. Like an idiot, I thought, oh, I'll just put some squash down here in the garden. And so I started all of these squash plants from seed in the greenhouse, and then I ended up with too many. And so I just threw some of them down here for various reasons. So this one is, you know, those fun baby pumpkins that I planted mostly for the girls to have around Halloween time. Kind of a three sisters type of approach, but I guess technically only two sisters since I don't have the beans. I just have the squash growing with the corn because I wanted to try that, right? Like it sounded like a good idea. But here's the problem. Let's pan around and you'll get to see how bad this is getting. There's trails there. There's supposed to be a bed here, and there's a bed back there. I'll put in some old videos and pictures maybe of what this garden looks like when it's not being eaten by a mountain of squash. But it's just nuts right now. And you can see what the squash is starting to do, right? Like it's crawling up the cucumber trellis. It's crawling up the shed back there in the back. Right? Like it's just going everywhere and taking over everything. It's choking out bushes. Now, why is that a problem? Well, if it goes long enough and the plants are strong enough, which this particular squash is a variety of butternut, and I went nuts like an idiot, and over there I planted, I think 4 in a bed, and then I put one back there, and then 2 more right there, and then a couple more right there, and then maybe 1 or 2 over there by the grape, and then there was 1 in the back. So there's literally like 8 or 9 squash plants back in this little space that, I mean, that shed I think is 16 feet long, and so not a lot of space for something as vigorous as a winter squash. I like living next to a moderately main county road because it means they plow it in the wintertime and it's nice. It sucks for filming. There's always people driving by. But yeah, so that, I mean, squash is just so vigorous, such a strong grower that it's literally just choking out everything that's trying to grow in here. I don't know what to do, honestly. At this point, I'm torn between, do I go in there and just start butching the vines back and cutting things out? And if I do, is that going to reduce my harvest yields on the squash? Is there anything in it that's worth saving? Like, debatable, right? Like you can't see any of it. There's eggplants in there. There's 4 jalapenos in there that are probably dead by this point. You know, at some point I'm gonna have to be able to get to the backside of that grapevine to try to harvest the grapes. And if the grapes are ready to harvest before the squash is ready to harvest, what's that gonna do? Like, there's just a whole lot of issues that I've created for myself by just neglecting to remember the fact that squash grows like crazy. I came down here mostly because I wanted you guys to see this space here behind me. This space was intentionally set up for squash. Like, I knew that's what I wanted to grow there. And it's still, look, my poor neighbor can't even mow the edge of the pasture because the squash vines are just growing out there like crazy. Okay, so same thing here, guys, right? Like, all squash. You can see it's just growing all over out there. Grew through the fence. We got all sorts of things happening. So this side has winter squash. These are yellow acorns. You can see one there. There's more back in there. Okay, but this whole space, you know, I think if you look down the edge of this fence from right here in front of us, so right here, I'll raise my hand as we go from right here, kind of like back to the edge of that fence is where this bed that was this squash is. Man, I think in there I planted like 8 or 10 squash vines. So, you know, of course they went nuts and grew everywhere. Same size bed on this side. And this side actually has summer squash, but there's only a green zucchini here, a yellow crooked neck in the middle, and a Romanesco style zucchini up there, which is awesome. I love it. It's super pretty. But like literally can't walk down that side. I have to come in here inside the greenhouse to walk through because I don't want pokey squash stuff on my legs because it itches. So, I mean, squash goes nuts if you haven't got the message yet. Let me turn this around. I'm going to show you the last little bit here because there used to be trails all over through here. In fact, we used to sit around the fire out here in this spot, but these squash plants have just completely overtaken this space as well. Okay, so same thing down this side. We got some sun glare and I apologize, but all through here is just a pile of sugar pie pumpkin, which has grown out all over the place. In here, like you can see, we've got some kale trying to come up in the middle of all of that. Excuse me. There is a acorn squash hiding in there. I'm sure we can go find some of these things. So standard green acorn in here. There's one right there. Beautiful squash. Over here, these pumpkins are just reaching for everything they can find. There's a beautiful pumpkin there. Another one there. Just completely going crazy. Pumpkin back there. So there should be lots of beautiful pumpkins, but again, you know, that was a row. Over there, I'll try to find the pictures of when we planted them, or at least when we laid out the beds. But I loaded it, right? Like I put offset, you know, so like one here, one there, one here, one there, one here, kind of in a zigzag pattern. There's probably 10 at least, if not 15 pumpkin plants planted over there. That acorn squash is down to, I think I started with 4 or 5. I think at least one I know has died. So, you know, that's kind of taken off in that space. And then out there in the middle, there was a smaller bed where we planted the butternut squash. I want to say we put in probably 6 or 8 plants there. And guys, literally, like, I'm on the back side of this garden, so these plants all originate from right there. Okay, I am easily 10-15 feet away when I show you that. That's a butternut squash, and it's growing clear over here. It's reaching clear out. There was a 4-foot wide path over there between the beds and the edge of the greenhouse, and you can tell the plants are starting to go up the side of the greenhouse because everything over there has been filled in. So this butternut has just taken over this whole side. It's buried a watermelon. You can kind of see the watermelon that's hanging on right back in there. And then, if that wasn't bad enough, in front of all of that corn, I planted the rest of the sugar pie pumpkins. So there's even more pumpkins growing over there. All right, so there you go. I hope that your takeaway from all of this is that you realize that squash will eat your garden. Literally, they are just vigorous plants. So if you are new to gardening, or like me, you've been growing for a while now, but you forget sometimes how much squash can grow. Because, like, honestly, I don't usually grow winter squash. You know, it's just not something that I do. We have friends and family that grow some squash in the local area. We can go to farmers markets and get that kind of stuff. And so it's not something during normal times that I really worry about. But with things that were going on, I was like, well, this is food that grows well here. It grows a lot of food, as you can see from all the squash that I've showed you, because they're all cars. They're all edible. Those pumpkins, like every squash that's growing here, other than those little baby pumpkins, is edible. So, you know, but I mean, it's just crazy. So, know what you're getting yourself into. More cars. Okay. Nope. Yeah, okay. Know what you're getting yourself into when you plant winter squash. Just make sure that you have ample space for it to grow and do its thing, because it is a monster in the garden. It's just going to go crazy. And I think if there's one thing that I've taken away from all of this, and I've seen some other people do it on videos, and I just didn't think about it, I could have trellised it, right? Like, we could have run some sort of a hoop panel system like that using the cattle panels like we did for the tomatoes, which works awesome, by the way. I could have done something like that to try to get some of those vines up off the ground and that sort of stuff. That's the beauty about all of this, right? You live, you learn, you do the things, you learn what was good, what was bad, and then next time you do it a little bit different in a little more productive way. But I take solace in the fact that I'm certain there's going to be a mountain of squash come out of all of this and all of that for this year. So fingers crossed that everything goes according to plan and we get to bring in a good harvest. All right, guys, that's all I got for this one. Thanks for watching and tuning in. Do us a favor, if you don't mind, give this thing a thumbs up, maybe comment down below if you have any tricks for how you grow squash and keep them from eating your garden, because yeah, you've seen my problems. But it's still fun, and you know why, because life's better when it's lived outdoors. We'll see you next time.